Hello, and welcome to my third attempt at this video. The first two attempts, actually, this is my fourth attempt. The first several attempts didn't go very well, so hopefully the fourth time is the charm. So this is our one video that focuses on both product concepts and product strategies. And what we'll do here is we will define what is meant by price. We'll talk about pricing concepts. We'll talk about pricing strategies, and then as a subset of pricing strategies, we'll talk about a few pricing tactics. So let's jump right into it and define what is meant by price. And I have my handy dandy cheat sheet here. And price refers to the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service. So again, the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or a service. And when we think of price, because it is the 21st century, we think of money, right? But price does not have to involve money, right? Now, this class is an example of a price that involves money, and it's not called price; it's called tuition, right? You guys pay tuition, and the exchange that's going on is that you're paying money to the university and I'm providing services so that you can learn all sorts of fun stuff, right? Yeah. About marketing. But, if we go back maybe 300 years, if I were a college professor 300 years ago, you say, yeah, you wouldn't be doing this right now. No, I wouldn't be doing this right now. That is true. But you might have paid, we might have come to an agreement where for you to learn about marketing, which really didn't exist 300 years ago, but, maybe I'd have been teaching something Shakespearean, right? Shakespearean stuff. If you wanted to learn about Shakespearean stuff and you said, I'll give you 3 cows if you'll teach me about Shakespeare, that would also be a price, right? So the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service, right? So again, price does not have to involve money. Second thing is that price is a very flexible component of the marketing mix, and technology has really exacerbated it. If for no other reason than it can be done a lot quicker. You guys are all relatively young. You might talk to your parents, or you might talk to your grandparents about how gas stations used to have to change the prices. They used to have these big signs at the gas station, and they were, generally, 15 feet, maybe 15 feet, 15, 20 feet in the air, right? And what somebody would have to do is they'd have to get a ladder, or they'd have to get a really long pole and that had a magnet on it, and they would literally, have to change the prices by, putting either going up the ladder or using this big long stick that had a magnet on it to take the numbers off and to put new numbers on. Um, if you look at Amazon, you recognize that Amazon, you look at something at one time on Amazon, and maybe if you go back 2 hours later, it's a whole, it's a whole different price. So, of the 4 components of the marketing mix that we're going to talk about, price is, generally considered the most flexible. Okay. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about pricing concepts. And one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about pricing concepts is the potential impact of the macro environmental factors that we talked about both in the introductory lecture as well as with the international marketing discussion that we had. And so things like technological factors and economic conditions and political considerations can play a big role in pricing. So if you think about, for example, if you remember the last recession that took place, 2007 through 2009, a lot of organizations really looked for ways to cut their cost so that they would be able to, offer prices that people could afford. And in a similar vein, what you saw was a number of particularly kind of what I would call casual sit-down restaurants like an Applebee's and a Chili's. You saw them doing a lot of stuff with, some sort of value combination, like two entrees and an appetizer for 20 or 25 bucks. Okay, so again, when we talk about price, you got to, keep in mind that the macro environmental factors can have a big influence on price. And in terms of pricing concepts, there's really there's not a great deal that I can add to what the book does, quite honestly, because I think the book does a really nice job. I'm not saying that the book doesn't do a nice job on other things, but it talks about what is called the 5C framework, and it's called the 5C framework because each one of the topics begins with the letter C. So that's how we'll talk about pricing. And let me put my handy dandy glasses on. And so the first one is company objectives. And Exhibit 14.2 in the book, does a really nice job of outlining possible company objectives with respect to pricing, as well as how those objectives might be manifested in a price. So if you look at something like profit maximization, will generally require a different kind of pricing philosophy than would maximizing market share. So, for example, if you're trying to maximize market share, you may go for a much lower price in order to be able to capture a larger market share. Alternatively, profit maximization, you're probably looking at contribution margin kinds of issues, and that might argue for a higher price for the product. Right. So first C is company objectives. The second one is customers. And this is where you get into discussions of demand curves and demand elasticities and things of that nature. And so what it's really important, when you start talking about customers and demand elasticities and things of that nature, it's really important from a marketing perspective to understand, whether you're dealing with segments that are elastic or inelastic with respect to demand. And so, for example, if you think about flying on an airplane, what you would find is you might have business travelers and you might have leisure travelers. Business travelers tend to be a lot more price inelastic because time is more important than money. Leisure travelers, on the other hand, tend to be more price elastic. And in part because money is more important than time. And so what you find is if you look at airline pricing, there's a lot of different prices that are out there, and there are a lot of different price points, and they're basically meant to appeal to people that have different kinds of demand elasticities with respect to a particular airline flight. So customers are important consideration, or one of the considerations in the 5 C's of pricing. A third C is cost, and I know there are a number of you who are accountancy majors, and so you would be right at home with the cost stuff with fixed and variable and marginal and total cost and all that kind of fun things. And so it becomes really important for an organization to have a solid understanding of its cost. The one thing is you don't want to price something below its variable cost per unit because you're not making any contribution to the fixed cost. Alternatively, some organizations are hesitant to price everything based on a total cost or an average cost basis because it may be leaving money on the table because there are some products that you're just not going to be able to sell very well at its average cost. But if you sell that, let's say at below its average cost, you might be able to make that up on some other products that you're selling at greater than the product's average cost. Okay. Um, a fourth C is competition, and this is where it becomes important for an organization to understand, what kind of market that it's operating in from a market structure perspective. And you may be having flashbacks to Econ 201 or Econ 202, and you go, oh my God, now I have to think about whether I'm dealing in a monopolistic situation, or an oligopolistic situation, a monopolistically competitive situation, or a pure competition. And the importance of having an understanding of kind of what the market structure is it drives, or it should drive, how an organization prices its products. So, if you're in a monopoly situation, you don't really have to worry a whole lot about price, because people don't have, or customers don't have, a choice. On the other hand, if you're in a monopolistically competitive situation, right, large number of sellers, none of which dominate the market, right, then prices, you're going to have to be really competitive with price, because there are a lot of other companies out there that could basically satisfy the same need, the same wants, and perhaps do it better than you. And if they're charging the same price as you're probably not going to have much of a market share. And so, and a fifth C in the 5C framework involves channel members. And the key thing with when thinking about channel members with respect to price is that it's important for, and this sounds like a bromide, or a platitude, or something of that nature. It's really important for the channel members to be on the same page when it comes to pricing. And you say, well, how wouldn't they be on the same page? Well, one of the things, if you look at, for example, company objective, all right, you might want to, when you're developing channel, one of the things you might want to look at is, am I going to be working with a company that's trying to achieve the same thing from a pricing objective perspective that my organization is trying to achieve? So, if you were to put together, a profit maximizer and a market share type company, that might not be a real good fit, because the profit maximizer is going to be looking to, maximize its profits, and so they might be charging a higher price. That may not be beneficial to another channel party who's trying to maximize market share, because, as I said earlier, maximizing market share might be predicated on offering a bunch of products at a relatively low price in the marketplace. And so your contribution margin would be smaller from those, as opposed to a profit maximization effort, where your profit margin or your contribution margin is going to be bigger. So we've talked about, we have a brief overview of the 5C framework with respect to pricing concepts. And now what we'll do is we'll talk about pricing strategies, and then we will give a few examples of pricing tactics. And what pricing strategies refer to is an organization's long-term approach to setting prices. And there are three primary pricing strategies that organizations can use. They can use what are known as cost-based pricing strategies, where the focus is, the primary driver of the price is a cost. Is it is it a break-even cost? Is it a an average cost with a markup kind of thing? But the primary driver, the primary emphasis in pricing in a cost-based strategy is the cost of the product. Second kind of pricing strategy is a competition-based strategy, and that is basically, we talked earlier about gasoline prices. Gasoline prices, gasoline stations would be an excellent example in many cases of a competition-based strategy, because if you think about it, and oftentimes what you'll see is you'll see gas stations on, if there's like a four-way intersection, you might see gas stations on two of those four corners, and more times than not, if the one gas station says, "Well, I'm going to charge $2.19 for the lowest grade unleaded gasoline," right? The gas station across the street is likely pricing its gas at $2.19, and so if one of the stations, because it's not real hard, it's again, we go back to the fact that pricing is a very flexible component of the marketing mix. It's not real hard, to look out your front window and go, hey, that gas station across the street, they're now selling the unleaded gasoline at $2.25. We might as well up our price to $2.25 as well, right? So there's an example of a competition-based strategy. And then the third is not a price-based strategy, but it's called a value-based strategy. And remember, value, as we have defined it in this course, is kind of like a benefit versus cost or resources expended ratio. And so there are a number of pricing philosophies out there that are based on value. And so, kind of a classic example of a value-based pricing strategy is a value meal. You say, wow, I would have never guessed that, big boy. Hey, I'm telling you, right? This marketing stuff can be really sophisticated, and at times it can be, blindingly simple, although a value meal is just one example of a value-based strategy. And you think about, kind of the idea, kind of the idea behind a value meal is that, let's just say, and I'll use McDonald's as an example. You go in there and you buy a Big Mac and you buy a fry and you buy a large drink, and you add up the prices, and maybe it comes to $7. Well, if you buy those as a bundle, right? Big Mac, fries, and a large soda, maybe the price is $5.39. And so, again, three basic pricing strategies: a cost-based strategy, competition-based strategy, and value-based strategy. I also mentioned that we would talk about some pricing tactics, which are short-term approaches within the longer-term approaches that we talked about. And there's a number of different kinds of short-term approaches. One is the old quantity discount. You say, I'll be a son of a gun. And the way the quantity discount works is basically the more you buy, generally the cheaper the product is, right? So if you buy, we have two cats, right? If I buy the 16-pound bag of the one cat, especially Boots the cat, Boots loves to eat, right? So if I buy the 16-pound bag of Purina cat chow, it's cheaper on a per pound basis than if I buy like 3.5 pound bags of the Purina cat chow. There's also a tactic known as product bundle pricing, and this is defined as a pricing tactic where two or more complementary products are offered as a bundle, and the price of the bundle is less than if the products were sold individually. All right, so again, two or more complementary products offered as a bundle, and the price of the bundle is less than if the products were sold individually. So again, the value meal that I just talked about would be an example of product bundle pricing. A lot of technology related companies offer bundles, like if you, for example, if you have AT&T service, you might have a phone, you might have internet, and you would have cable TV package. AT&T now owns DirecTV. So, instead of paying for phone, internet, and cable, what would happen is that the price of the bundle, right, the phone, the internet, and cable, would be cheaper than if you bought the phone, the internet, and the cable separately, right? So that's called product bundle pricing. And a third pricing tactic is and again, there are many more than three. A third product pricing tactic is what is known as captive product pricing. And this refers to the price of a product that must be used with another product, right? So this refers to the price of a product that must be used with another product. And an example that I like to use now is you say, oh, look, you got an iPhone. Yes, it's an old iPhone. It's a 5. It's a dinosaur. I get that. But if you think about cell phones, smartphones, you got a smartphone, absolutely worthless if you don't have a service plan, right? And how this all plays out is that, and I may have mentioned this before, but when cell phones first were introduced in the mid 80s, mid 1980s, the price of the price of the first cell phone was $4,000. You'd say, no, it wasn't. It was $3,995. Okay, it was $3,995. Yep, you got me. All right. $3,995, and that was not with the plan, right? You had to have a plan. You just couldn't use a cell phone. You needed a service plan. Well, if we fast forward to 2017, right, prices of these smartphones are not $3,995. I mean, there sometimes is a price, but excuse me, some of the service providers will now, if you agree to a 2-year contract, let's say, you sometimes can get the phone for free, right? So that's an example of captive product pricing. Right? How do you set the price of a product that must be used with another product? Now, me being a guy, a second example is razor blades and razors. Sometimes, and this didn't happen when I was younger, but my understanding is that when a lot of guys turn 18, some razor manufacturing companies will send them a razor, and you'll get it absolutely free. And the killer is, the killing aspect of it is that the blades become incredibly expensive. Right? So, again, I failed to meet the 20-minute mark, but I will stop here. And we'll see you next time, where we will have our first discussion of integrated marketing communications. Bye for now.